I think it also takes a lot to be able, for me, I'll speak for me. It took a lot for me to be able to see my parents like that
Mm.
as humans. I think one of my big first heartbreaks came from my parents. My parents got divorced, they separated. It hurt. My dad left, and I was mad at him for years, like angry. And I think I was angry because of how good of a father I thought he was while he was in the house. And when he wasn't there, like, it brought along an absence and a callous for me that was just like rough. What I did though was, because I suppressed a lot, I couldn't tell him all these things. So a lot of my anger came out on my mom at times. Like,
Mm-mm.
because my mom was the one who stayed, so she was
She's
dependable.
around.
So I could have
Mhm.
screaming matches with my mom,
Mm-hmm.
but like with my dad, I was very like mute and siloed when it came to my emotions towards him. So I want to pose this question. When did you first experience your first parental heartbreak? What did that look like for y'all?
Mm.
For me, it was definitely the divorce. Watching, I think as a kid, you don't know what chaos is. You have no
Mm,
idea like what is normal. So I was used to them fighting in the house. And so when mom left, I was like, now what, wait a minute.
mm,
It was such a big shift to have a parent like leave. And I think that was the time where it was just like watching my dad grieve, my mom making visits and trying to just string things together. And it's such an unfortunate time because I was going away to college and I wasn't home. So my sister was like dealing about it like all by herself. And she was so young and not really understanding like the new dynamics. Mom wasn't home and big sister's not home, and dad's like
mm,
emotionally unavailable. And I think that was like a major heartbreak for the family for sure.
mm. Can I ask you this just real quick before we get to everybody else? Um, what was that experience like watching your father grieve? I remember when my parents separated, thankfully my grandmother was present. I never got to see my mother emote. And I remember
Mm.
somebody asked me, do you think that was like a good or a bad thing that would shield from you? And I told her, I was like, I was like, I kind of see both sides. Like, I'm grateful, like I had an opportunity to be a child, but there was also this ignorance to how severe divorce was and played a part in both sides. So what, like, how did you feel seeing like your parent grieve at that moment?
I think I just stepped up. I just sort of took
Mm,
on the role of caretaker and the sort of solid rock for everyone, which gives me my emotional intelligence today. Like I know how to talk to people's soul. Like I know how to talk to your heart. I know where the wound is. I know where the pain is, and I know how to like sweep it all up for the community.
mm,
Because I had to be. And it was difficult. I put my emotions to the side for the betterment of the family, which women are sort of taught and ushered to do.
mm.
Um, but we couldn't all break down. I was like, this is a lot. Like
Yeah.
we couldn't all break down. That
Mm-hmm.
was too
Mm,
much.
mm. Tristan, I'll go. I'll talk
Go
to
to
you.
me. I would say my first emotional heartbreak as well from a parent is probably from my father. My father was not present in the way that he should have been, and that was hard. I'm like the constant. Why don't he want me, man? The Will Smith joint.
Yep.
And
Yep.
I think like I took a lot of that out on my mom as well, being mad about stuff that I had no like context of. Why isn't he here? Why doesn't he want to be here? And you don't understand like somebody who's there every day, and you like they don't really get the credit for being there every day because they're there disciplining you and all this stuff, and you like, yeah, but where's this nigga at? And I see like my friends out with their dads, and I had some friends that had like, and it's so funny like the understanding you have as a child. I had some friends that had shitty dads, but my mindset was like, but that nigga there, and
Yeah,
you don't realize
man.
how much better off you are. And then I lived in a house where I had a grandfather that was an amazing grandfather. Always there. My uncle was there. He did, he was 16 when I came around, so he did the best that he could to like step up and be that. But I was never at home by myself. My grandma, my mom was always there. My uncle and my grandfather were always there. So they stepped up in that regard, and I was still always searching for like, but where's my dad? My dad. And it's something that I didn't realize until he passed away a couple years ago from COVID. And I found out, and I was on the phone crying with like my mom, and my mom was like, I feel sorry for you because this is the first time in your life that I can't fix a thing for you, and I don't know what to do. So then like I'm calling, my grandma, and my grandma was like, yeah, I understand it, but it's not your fault. I was like blaming myself for being able to reach out more, and she was like, it'll never be the child's fault for the parent not wanting to be there. And then we get to my uncle, and like I didn't know it was my uncle. Like my uncle's very blunt. My thesis film is actually based off of us. It's called Lions and Lambs because one of my best friends was like, y'all are the same person, but he's so much harder than you. So I caught him on the phone with him, and I'm like feeling bad, and he was like, fuck that nigga. He was like, that nigga is not, he was like, I get you sad, but fuck him. He wasn't there. You've done amazing things in your life regardless. And he was like, look at all the niggas that stepped up and gave you fatherhood that had you had him, wouldn't have had the desire to be in your life in that way. And he was like, you've had a ton of niggas that taught you how to be a man. So like, I know you're upset about not having him, but you've had so many fathers way past just that one person that you might not have liked, because he was extremely religious. I'm not super religious. So like our vibes might not have even matched anyway.
But it's so interesting because like I think that's a good point. I was having a conversation in therapy about like deconstructing like the idea of like what my life would have been like if my dad was in my life actively in the same house. And it was very much, Uncle Phil like it was everything that I conceptualized from media. That's and the reality is that even Uncle Phil wasn't Uncle Phil. Like it's a show. But I watched that for so long that I internalized that this is what manhood's supposed to be, fatherhood's supposed to be. And it's crazy that these concepts come from 22 minutes. So
but it's like that. He there every day you get off of work.
Every day
you come from school.
Yes.
He's there to parent you in some aspect, and I think like even now is something that I'm unlearning. I think when I think of like me becoming a parent, there's still moments where I'm like, oh, I have to be better than my father. I have to be better than my father. I have to be there to do this because he wasn't there. And it's like you're still allowing someone who wasn't there to have a hold on you. And there's things that like in that unlearning that aspect, also like letting go and a bit of forgiveness for yourself, not for them.
For sure. Ade, I would love to hear your point of view.
Well, honestly, I was gonna say, Tasha, if you could, because it really coincides with what I was about to say. But Lex's last comment at 6:30, I feel like is a perfect kind of segue if you want to throw it up there. Even people who have active parents still get issues. Yes. I guess that just comes with it. So like I'm listening to I don't know too much about. I'm really learning about y'all parents and y'all relationships as we having this discussion. And I realize as we're talking that I'm probably the only person in this conversation right now who has two parents that are still currently married. But it's so interesting though, because when you talk about that first heartbreak, it's what I've started to learn, and this was more so in adulthood, how much, and specifically when I'm currently married, specifically when I began my relationship with my wife now, Lola, almost 9 years ago, and we're getting to the point of marriage that I started to realize that the marriage that I had in my mind, the model of my parents, is not the marriage that, for one, that I thought it was, and two, the one that I would want to model my own marriage off of, right? And the grief kind of and the shock around just that concept, I think, was very jarring for me. And it's interesting because it's never placed in the same kind of conversation as divorce, and for good reason, right? In terms of like the impact of divorce and what that means for both the the entire family, let alone children who are, who are impacted by it, it's a completely separate conversation. But I'll be honest, like it's in my adulthood now, and I'm sitting here trying to model and look at other examples of what. I'm not even gonna put a description to it. I'm not gonna say it's positive or negative, but let me say marriage examples that I want to model myself off of. It was crazy to realize that, unfortunately, that's not my parents. And I'm also in therapy and have some conversations with my own therapist about like the grief, the fact that even changing your concept of that, your image of your parents, relationship, and all of that, you also have to grieve that, because as an adult, you're realizing that it's much different than this kind of romanticized view that you had growing up. So honestly, that's first heartbreak. It may not be the heartbreak to the level of what a lot of y'all have been describing, but that was mine for sure. It's just this concept of like, they're not, going back to what we were talking about, they're not perfect, but also their relationship ain't perfect.
Yeah.
That's that's a beautiful segue, just because people are being so active in the chat. We thank you all for being here and watching live. And Dea says, my heart broke when I learned that I modeled my parents' dysfunctional communication traits, but it was so freeing once I realized it, so I could change it.
That is my favorite cousin. That is the love. That is love her. I call her my cousin. That's my sister. That is my favorite cousin of all time.
Shout out to Cuz.
Yes, and thank her for supporting the Seed and Spark campaign. We definitely appreciated that as well. What's up, Token? Oh my gosh. Did we truly understand the gravity of grief back then? Trini Boy says, for me, trying to navigate the shift from being a child to an adult and showing respect while my parents not treating me like I was a kid anymore. And that's a really delicate balance as well. I think when parents birth you, change your nasty diapers, potty train you, do your ABCs, and like raise you, and all of a sudden you like, so I learned in therapy, they're like, okay. You'll always be their baby. And so this becomes like, we can very easily slip into a dynamic where we get stuck as the dirty diaper baby and not a growing adult experiencing the world with you, and that can sit next to you and not beneath you under authority all the time.